IVM.
Hey guys, IVM podcast is turning 7. Can you believe it? I started this podcast with IVM just a few months back and it's been amazing. The team at IVM inspires me to do better every day. It's been a pretty awesome journey for me with these wonderful folk and I can't wait to see what the next 7 years bring.
Pressure to do well in exams can be overwhelming for children and can affect their mental health. Exam anxiety is a huge concern for a lot of students and their parents. In this episode, Meghna and I discuss the signs and symptoms of exam anxiety and how parents can help their kids, whether they're 8 or 18, to deal with exam anxiety. Almost every job in the world requires training, except parenting.
You need to learn parenting on the job, and that can be really hard.
Here on Big Talk About Tiny Humans, we want to help you navigate the world of parenting better and make your lives a little bit easier.
Hi, I'm Meghna.
And hi, I'm Devishobha.
Every week, we bring you the best research on parenting,
Top tips from experts,
and actionable strategies to confront the numerous challenges that all parents and educators face.
So let's get started, shall we? Hi, Meghna.
Hi, Shobha. How are you?
Doing great. And just really excited about the mahal, the exam mahal and everything that's happening. And I'm really in a kind of a nostalgia kind of a situation here because my daughter is facing her 10th boards now. And
Oh my God, the dreaded 10th boards. How are you coping? How is she coping?
well, she seems to be okay, but I do see a lot of anxiety in her. And I just could not help recollect my own experiences, in 10th grade and even before that throughout my schooling. I'm just wondering, not much has changed, despite the fact that the whole learning modes have changed now. We are entirely online and people have really upgraded on learning technology. And still there seems to be a lag in the mindset. One of the things that I, very distinctly remember from my childhood is that when I was in 5th grade, and that was not even a board exam, it was just a simple unit test. And I had a sudden attack of stomach cramps, exam anxiety. Of course, at that time, I did not know it was due to exam anxiety. I was just suffering from severe cramps and I did not even tell my parents because I just did not want to waste time because I had the exam the next day. Because I knew if I told my parents, they would take me to the doctor and I will lose time. I was just that anxious, so I didn't want to tell my parents. And finally, it exploded into a full blown stomach ache. And I went to my parents and I told them, and they immediately took me to a doctor. And that doctor happened to be a parent of my classmate, and that particular classmate was my competitor in class. So what happened was we went home. Of course, that lady, his mom, was very gracious. She, checked me and she said, "You're fine, except that maybe you're, a little anxious about tomorrow's exam." And then I went to him. I mean, I spoke to him, the boy, and his name was Vaibhav. I still remember. And I asked him,
Vaibhav,
"Hey,"
if you're listening.
yeah, maybe I'm not in touch with him, but anywhere if he's listening, I asked him, "Hey, how prepared are you for tomorrow's exam?" And he said, "You know what? Not much. I haven't done this and that." And then immediately I could feel my cramps, like, loosening up.
Easing
I could
out.
feel on completely, my anxiety melting out. And I was like, what is this? What I was feeling all this while? And my dad was like, "Come on, you cannot really take so much tension for such a small thing." But you know what? Despite all, and I have to really confess that my parents have never put so much pressure on me for exams, but just the peer pressure building up, And I wonder if that is the same for my daughter and several students like her who are going through these exam pressures. And I'm just wondering, how can we as parents help them? Because despite the best intentions, my parents did not know what I was going through. And And I just think that it is so common. So, Meghna, just let me help me understand how common this is, and what is the scenario right now in this new age of learning?
Well, Shobha, you're absolutely bang on when you started by saying that, so much has changed and yet some things remain the same. You're absolutely right. I mean, you're talking about technology and online learning.
Yeah.
The freaking format of exams has changed. I mean, 10th boards is now a subjective, objective. I mean, really, the education system is trying to make things easier for the kids. But there's one thing that remains the same, and that is exam anxiety.
Right.
Okay, that feeling of uneasiness, that feeling of panic, that feeling of fear, nervousness, that happens before or during an exam. It is so bad. It can get so bad in some kids that it can lead to them completely blanking out, right? You can make a lot of mistakes in your exams. You're not able to think spontaneously. You leave out questions because in your hurry, you're so panicky that you miss out on reading questions. That happened to me once, by the way. In 10th board, actually. 10th board, imagine I left the 6 marker because I was so panicky, and even though I knew the answer to that question. So it's super common. It's super duper common. Even though most of us get nervous before an exam, there are few students who experience anxiety, which is so debilitating that they find it almost difficult to concentrate, right? They struggle to recall the things that they have already studied. See, a little nervousness is okay. A little nervousness is actually helpful. It's actually productive. But this, when anxiety becomes this excessive, it interferes with our performance. It just clouds out. While you were describing what happened, that incident of Vaibhav, it seems that what you did and what a whole lot of students commonly do is make this monster in our head,
right?
And that's what this is about. And it's so common. And you know what, parental pressure, I mean, luckily for you it was not the case, but in India, parental pressure is one of the biggest sources of exam anxiety. There are other sources like the high achieving students. They typically put a lot of pressure on themselves. There's peer pressure, of course. But the biggest source of exam anxiety is parental pressure. So, yes, parents, really, if you're listening out there, you really need to listen to this episode till the end. And because we're going to be discussing strategies for what you can do with your kids. What is this exam anxiety all about? And why is it important for us to finally have these conversations with our kids?
Absolutely. I just, when you were describing that you left that 6 marker in your boards, right? The exact same thing happened with my daughter in her first term of her 10th boards. She was completely prepared. She knew all the answers, but she kind of flipped the answers. She read not for she left out the not part and she answered for the opposite, and she lost a good, I think, 8 marks, and she didn't even realize. She came back home very happy, like, yeah, I did very well. and then after her lunch and everything, I kept telling her, just no looking up the question paper before you rest, before you have your food and rest, and only then you're going to see it.
Actually, you should not do that even. You know what? You should never do a post-mortem of the exam paper after you've written it. You should just leave it.
So true, and I realized
and focus on the next exam. Yeah,
absolutely. Because you know what happened? She realized that, and she was so upset. Like I was like at my wits' end to have her convinced that this is not the end of the world. It's okay. It's really not that big a deal. It's fine. 8 marks is nothing, so that's okay. And you did your best, so that is what is important. So, I mean, I just want to understand, what are the common signs and symptoms of anxiety that, we tend to miss out as parents?
So, see, as I said, exam anxiety occurs on a continuum. Okay. It can range from a little nervousness and fear. A little bit, as I mentioned, is fine. It can go on to, so what I'll do is I'll discuss the ways in which exam anxiety manifests on 4 levels. One is our body, right? One is our feelings or emotions. One is our thoughts, right? And one is our behavior. So in terms of the body, like with any anxiety, the symptoms of exam anxiety can come up as palpitations, when your heart is racing, sweaty palms, you start feeling nauseous, you get butterflies in your stomach. So typically that is how exam anxiety would show up in our body. in terms of feelings, in terms of our emotions, that feeling of nervousness, worry, extreme fear, and helplessness, even hopelessness sometimes, right? That is at the level of our emotions, at the level of our thoughts. And this is super important because we are sometimes not even aware that this is how our negative self talk is going in our brain. And our thoughts can, sound like, I can't do this, I will fail. What if I forget everything? My parents will be so disappointed if I get low marks. So these are typically the negative thoughts that are going on in our mind when we are super anxious. And in terms of behavior, it's difficulty making decisions, fidgeting, avoidance. A lot of students that, I've seen in my practice, they just skip the exam because not showing up for the exam is, classic avoidance behavior. And it sort of helps them, not deal with that dread, not deal with that anxiety at all. So they typically avoid taking the exam, they skip out. I mean, you can't really, I mean, nobody does that with boards, definitely. But, with the unit tests or with the smaller tests, that some students, the anxiety gets so much that they end up skipping the exam altogether. So at these four levels, the body, feelings, thoughts, and behavior, exam anxiety shows up.
Right. Right. And I was also wondering if this is a phenomenon that is very specific to Asian culture, because you remember we were discussing the book, The Battle Hymn of the Tiger Mom, and it really seems like such a familiar thing in our culture, right? And of course, now we know it's so prevalent in the Chinese communities, in Japanese communities. So I was just wondering if this is a thing about Asian culture. And I remember you mentioning something about the American culture also. So what do you think are some parallels we can draw?
Actually, there are so many parallels. I'm so glad you brought up that book. It's one of my favorite books just because of the extreme emotions it aroused in me when I was reading it. I was like, what? Okay, but it's, of course, very common in Indian culture, the kind of helicopter parenting that we subject our kids to. But you know what? I have spent the last whole year interviewing top American experts, top American psychologists, and book authors. And it is crazy. I used to think that it's India, it's Asian culture, as you're mentioning, right? I used to think that, yeah, you know what? We are the ones pressurizing our kids for studying because, our aspirations are like that because typically our background has been, our parents' generation literally were fighting to make ends meet. And so they had big dreams for us. And that is why there is so much of academic pressure. However, it's so surprising that even in a country like US, right, where you don't have typically this background anymore, right, is that there is as much academic pressure, right? Kids right from kindergarten, if not primary school, are pressurized to study because their ultimate aim is college. You know what? If I'm learning piano, would this look good on my college application? If I'm getting a particular grade, how will that pan out in my college application? So actually the Indian scene and the American scene is not that much different at all. One would think that American parents are all liberal and it's so all cool, and they take gap years like at the drop of a hat. And India, you can't even think of a gap year and stuff like that. But no, I mean there is a whole lot of pressure even there.
Right. So this was Meghna and I talking about dealing with exam stress, and we will be back with you after a small break.
Hey everybody, it's been another great week on the IVM Podcast Network. On Storytellers and Storytellers, Vineet talks to music producer Kabir Katpalia. He shares what it was like making music for the film Gerhaiya. On Think Fast, Varun and Suchita are in conversation with Front Row's Ishanpreet Singh. He tells us about all there is to know about the subscription model. On The Wire Talk, Siddharth talks to author Pramod Kapoor about his new book, 1946 Royal Indian Navy Mutiny, The Last War of Independence. On Postcards from Nowhere, Utsav traces the legacy of Sindhis and tells us why crocodiles are important to them. And on Say No to Drama, Chetna deconstructs growing up but not growing apart in a relationship. Do follow us on social media. We're IVM Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And remember, if you're enjoying this show or any of our other shows for that matter, please do tell a friend. The word of mouth really helps. Also, don't forget to rate us on whatever platform you're listening to us and check us out on YouTube. You can check a list of all our channels at ivmpodcast.com/YouTube. And finally, we'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Bank of Baroda and HDFC Life Insurance. Thank you so much for making this possible.
All right, welcome back to Big Talk about Tiny Humans. We are talking about dealing with exam stress. So, Meghna, that was an interesting observation you made about the parallels between these cultures, Asian and American culture. And it's really an eye opener because just yesterday I was talking to my sister. She lives in the US and she is a postdoc from MIT. And some of the things that she was telling me about was really very heartening to me, because I was really curious about how high school kids are shaped there, what kind of priming and training they get in their school years. And turns out that high school kids, they are taught to craft their personas in a much more intentional manner than their Indian counterparts. I don't know about the other countries, but definitely it is so much different there because just like, we know that Americans are the best at marketing, and I think that is being.
What do you mean by crafting their persona, Shubha?
Persona, in the sense that they are taught, the children know exactly what goes into a resume. They know what kind of experience really will stand out for the future. What will help them in at such a young age. By the time they are in high school, they are already interning at university labs. They are interning at real companies. They're putting in real experience. They know exactly what they have to showcase. 2-3 months they know how to use their time, and they're not really focused all on academics, even though they are looking for an academic career. Even in cases where they do that, it's a very different kind of an approach, because here it's all about marks and academic scores, right?
Yeah.
So it's all based on marks and entrance exams at the most.
Correct. Yeah.
But there it's a lot more, that's what I said by crafting persona. What I meant is they try to integrate all of their experiences into this.
Right. Yeah. So it's a more well-rounded approach, right?
Yes, absolutely.
They're also they're not just harping on marks. They're also looking at, okay, what are your interests and, what kind of person you are really.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but it's crafting at the end of the day. What I have an objection to is that I know that there are American students who take up volunteering only because it will look good on their CV. And that's a typical example of what, psychologists call extrinsic motivation, which is I'm not doing volunteering because, it makes me feel good or because I'm reaching out to others or helping others. I'm doing volunteering because it looks good on my CV, because it'll help me get into college. I mean, come on, that's really not desirable, right? So
especially at that age, I think.
At any age, we don't want extrinsic motivation to be the driving force behind our actions.
Yeah, but I meant at that age because it kind of solidifies the wiring.
Doesn't
kind
it?
of solidifies.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right. So
yeah,
that is. Yeah.
So it has its pitfalls as well, right?
Yeah. So Meghna, I would just like to understand, what strategies do you recommend for parents? And I think I am definitely going to need all of these because with my daughter right now. So what strategies do you recommend for parents first of all, and then I'll come to the children, because I think children can do a lot more on their own as well.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of strategies out there, but what I'm going to outline is something that you won't really find easily on a Google search. And this is something I teach to a whole lot of my clients in therapy, both parents and their kids. And one of the first things is what I was mentioning when I was talking about the symptoms, in terms of thoughts. Pay attention to your self-talk. So when your child finds themselves getting anxious, they should start paying attention to the thoughts running in their mind, right? Obviously when you're anxious, you will have anxiety provoking thoughts. And a good way to identify these thoughts is to ask oneself, what am I thinking right now? What is making me feel nervous right now? What bad thing do I think will happen? Because typically in exam anxiety, you would start catastrophizing. Okay, so a good starting point is to encourage your child to make a list of all the thoughts that are running in their mind, and these thoughts which are anxiety provoking, which are making them anxious. And then as a step 2, teach your child how to challenge these anxious thoughts. Yeah, it's very, very important to make your child understand that just thinking something doesn't make it happen, right? Just because your child thinks that they will fare poorly does not mean they actually will, right? But how can you explain that to your child? You can do that by teaching them how to challenge your anxious thoughts. And challenging of anxious thoughts can be done in many ways. Like, for example, and this is actually part of what I'm discussing, the strategy is part of cognitive behavior therapy, which is, one of the gold standard standard of therapy. And something very commonly I teach to not just my clients who have exam anxiety, but in anxiety in general. And one of the most important things that you do when you challenge your anxious thoughts is you give yourself evidence or proof against your anxious thoughts. So, what is the evidence that this thought, for example, I'm thinking that I will fail my maths exam? What is the proof that it's true? What would I tell a friend if she had the same thought? Am I 100% sure that this thought that I have will happen? How many times has it happened before? So, in this kind of a logical and rational way, you sort of, figure out what are your anxious thoughts, and you give yourself proof or evidence against those thoughts. Okay. And of course, I cannot emphasize this enough. One of the most common parental response to your child's exam anxiety is to offer reassurance. Arey, don't worry, you will do fine, beta. Or you start giving solutions. Eat well and you will not feel weak. But this is actually not helpful to a child who is at that time maybe feeling overwhelmed with anxiety. So the first step is actually to empathize. Expressing empathy is actually one of the best ways in which you could respond to your child, because it makes them feel heard. Don't jump into offer solutions. You don't even have to wait for your child to express anxiety. You can just say, you know what, I am seeing that you're having difficulty studying, or I think it's hard for you when blah, 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 or you do look worried, you do seem worried. And these kind of statements can help open up conversations about your child's feelings. Just resist the urge to jump in with a solution. Empathize and await, because it's not a good idea to offer help unless asked. This it's no big deal. Arey exam hi to hai, to kya hua? Is the last thing you want to say to your child. Don't trivialize it, because to your child it's huge. They've already made a monster out of it. You saying it's not a big deal will not make that monster go away. Right? So empathize rather than reassure, empathize rather than jump into offer solutions, and empathize rather than trivialize.
Right.
Yeah.
And these are such great strategies. And I would also like to add that one of the things that you can really help your child with is at the preparation stage, right? Just help them prepare well, so well prepared is like half the anxiety gone.
Absolutely.
And for that, you will have to jump in a little ahead of time and just kind of, reassure them, monitor them along the way, so that you raise their confidence incrementally and in a very measurable, trackable manner. That is also one of the things that has helped in my daughter's case, is that when she feels well prepared, she feels less anxious.
No, absolutely. I think focusing on preparation is a big step, is a very important step. But I'm curious. You said monitoring your child's studies, right? But that looks very different in different families, right? Some children benefit from more monitoring, and some children benefit from less.
Yeah, I totally get that. Because I have 2 kids, and 2 children
Very
need different approaches.
styles,
Very different approach. So what I apply for my older child, I cannot, just will not work for my younger one. So I know that. So yeah, I can totally see what you're saying.
Yeah. So because children's learning styles are different, and how much they'll benefit from parental involvement is also different. Like, I was typically a student. I would just not want my parents to know what was going on. I would just be like, just stay away kind of thing. My sister was also like that. But I know that a lot of kids, they actually seek that help. They seek that support, right? But it's still a good idea to let them sort of ask for that support rather than you jumping in.
No, yeah, they do. And that's what I said. And one of our earlier episodes was also about that, right? Keeping all the communication channels open, so they can come back to us when they need help. So, yeah. So, what do you recommend for the child? What strategies?
See, if there are any kids listening to this podcast, or even if they're parents, this is what you need to tell your child. I know there are some things that I'm going to say which are going to appear so obvious, but they are so super important, especially when you know how the brain works. Okay. Getting enough sleep. I think one of them, and I've done that. I mean, I'm guilty as charged. Like, as a student, I think exam time is the time that you down yourself with coffee and you do not prioritize sleep. But actually, it's amazing when I actually, trained to become a clinical psychologist, what I read about what sleep does to the brain. Sleep is actually so critical to learning, Shobha. It is far more effective to learn something for 4 hours after you've slept for 8 hours than for you to learn for 8 hours after you've slept for four.
Absolutely.
Can you
So
beat that?
well put.
Yeah,
So well
so
put.
so please get enough sleep. I know it seems like, oh no, if I get in 2 more hours of prep, I will be able to, shine. But your sleep is important to solidify what you've already learned. Get a balanced diet, exercise. I know a lot of exercises is also one of the things that goes out of the window during exams, but it's so important to get those, those hormones running, those neurotransmitters working in your brain. And of course, if you're anxious, which you would be, as we discussed, to varying degrees, in different children, it looks different. But there are a lot of relaxation tools that you can practice, like deep breathing, right? Deep breathing exercises. You can open any app and do a guided meditation or a guided deep breathing and get downtime. What is downtime? Our brains are actually, they're made by nature in such a way that one of the most powerful things that we do for our brain is that we are not focusing very deeply on something. So we have these windows in which we are focusing, doing deep work, right, which is studying. But at other times that our brains are free to just daydream, to rest, to get outside in nature and take that in, to to sleep and to meditate and stuff. So downtime is also extremely important for our brains. And that is again something that we don't really prioritize during exams, right? I mean, sitting and daydreaming is what parents would say, hey, what are you doing? You're not supposed to. So downtime is actually super important for our brains. And of course, the thing that you mentioned, right, preparation will, I think, is half the battle won. So make sure that you have a timetable, that you have revision schedule, that you are practicing your old question papers, that the usual stuff, and fix your screen time, because the lure of social media and the lure of screen is also particularly high when they're stressed. So make sure that you're not spending just hours and hours in front of your laptop or your screens.
Yeah, I think you mentioned a very good point where you said the lure of social media. In fact, I was reading just last week that we blame children and ourselves also, and I realized this is so true, that we blame ourselves on procrastination. We think we are lazy, we're just not doing the work. But the actual reason for procrastination is just that thought that, I'm still not prepared, I'm not ready for that yet, and I will not do a good enough job of it. Right? So I think that is what goes on in our children's brains also when they're procrastinating. And I think what you said about, prioritizing your well-being, I think that makes so much of a difference in that mindset and just allows them to prepare so well, and then thereby the consequences will speak for themselves. So Meghna, that was so beautifully put. Thanks for explaining that so well. So what I get from this is, you mentioned 4 major points: body, emotion, thoughts, and self. I see that it forms a beautiful mnemonic, BETS. So B for body, where you will pay attention to sleep, exercise, healthy diet, and also relaxation exercise throughout your preparation time, throughout the day, and watch what you're doing. Then emotion, this one is for parents. This is to empathize with their exam anxiety, empathize with their feelings, and not jump into giving reassurances and solutions immediately. Then T for thoughts, that is to help them turn negative thoughts into self-kindness, into realistic thinking, and really helping them challenge their negative thinking patterns. And then self-preparation, this one is to watch how much time you spend on social media, how much time you spend outside of your preparation activities that really go into solid preparation. And revision, practice, timetable, everything that you have to do to feel confident and well prepared for the exam. So this is all the common stuff, but including when you include a wholesome a thinking and inculcation of all of these practices, I'm sure all of our children will come out in flying colors. And all the best to our children and our parents.
So that's our episode for today. Thank you for listening to Big Talk About Tiny Humans, our podcast for parents and educators.
Hope you enjoyed it, and don't forget to share it with your friends and family.
Listen and subscribe to Big Talk About Tiny Humans on the IVM Podcasts app, website, and all major audio platforms. We are available everywhere.
You can follow us on social media and online. Meghna is at The Therapist Mommy on Instagram and YouTube. And you can check out her website, raisingfamilyacademy.com, for a transformative course on raising a child with emotional intelligence.
And Devishobha is at KidsKintha on Twitter and Instagram. And check out kidskintha.com for in-depth articles and events on parenting and child development.
While you're at it, do also check out other great shows from the IVM Podcasts network at shows.ivmpodcasts.com. And IVM is on social media at IVM Podcasts on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.
We'll catch you again on our next episode.
You're the people pleaser, right? Oh, yes. Or then desperately seeking the one? Or wait, you're the one who doesn't think they're ever good enough. Oh. So much drama. And for what? Is it doing you any good? Listen to me. I'm Chetna, your favorite positive action coach. Yes, I'm the one who has been dropping all those truth bombs on every episode. Oh, no. And it's time you learn to say no to drama. That's also what my podcast is called. And a new episode is out every Monday and Wednesday on the IVM Podcast app, website, as well as all major podcasting platforms.
We know you love fast food,
fast fashion,
faster payment,
lightning fast internet speed.
Then why not fast information?
On Think Fast, where we discuss the latest developments in the world of technology, business, marketing, pop culture.
With a side of sarcasm and my dad jokes, not just mine.
Not mine, Varun. My jokes are funny. So join me, guys, the funnier one, Suchita Salvan, co-founder of LBB.
And me, Varun Dugirala, the co-founder of The Glitch, as we think fast only on the IVM network.
Fresh episodes out every Monday.
On the IVM app, website, or wherever you get your podcast from.